Hello everyone, this is Rabbi Kenneth Hahn for Ask the Rabbi Thursdays. And today, as I indicated in my description of this video, I'm going to be reprising a talk I gave at Harvard actually this past Saturday, which I contextualized as being in response to the commencement address that Mark Zuckerberg gave a week ago today at Harvard. So let me just tell you a little bit of context on what's going on. So I was actually back at Harvard for my 35th reunion. I was also there for another reason, as you'll hear about in a moment. And on Thursday last, Mark Zuckerberg gave a speech. He gave the commencement address at Harvard, and he talked about a number of things. I actually thought he was going to talk about what he had written about in January of this year, which reflected what I perceived to be an existential crisis at Facebook when they looked at the impact the technology had had on the election and also other kinds of problems that clearly have become evident with the use of Facebook, things like trolling, cyberbullying, and of course live broadcasts of very problematic events, including murders and rapes. And I know it seems as though they've gone through a real existential problem there and really have been looking to ways to find solutions that might be technologically based solutions to the problems of free speech on Facebook and trying to figure out how to potentially limit that. And interestingly, Mark Zuckerberg's address last Thursday came right on the heels of the president of Harvard giving an address about the need to support, sustain, promote free speech on college campuses. So I actually chucked everything I had written that I was planning to write for, or much of what I had planned to say to my class, and came up with something different after I heard Mark Zuckerberg's speech. I had been asked to talk about why it is I came to be a rabbi late in life, and I did continue to talk about that, and I will talk about that today, as you'll see, and other things as well, specifically how Judaism can inform us about technology and our relationship to technology. So with that, I'm going to read to you. I'll try to deliver it nicely. What I said to upwards of 500 classmates at Harvard, former classmates, now fellow alums, on the occasion of my 35th reunion. So here's what I had to say. I've been asked to talk today about two topics: how I came to be a rabbi so late in life, as well as what Judaism can teach all of us about our relationship to technology. What the committee that invited me to speak doesn't know is that I'm also here today with another title, and that's Dad, as my son just went through his Harvard commencement and moved out of Pforzheimer House, his dormitory, only yesterday, and I'll have something to say about that too. So, how did I become a rabbi at age 55? Well, that one's pretty easy. It all probably started about 25 years ago when I heard perhaps the wisest teacher I ever knew speak the Sioux expression, Tankuyasin mitak yase ho, which loosely translated means, we are only here for help and health. That sounded good to me, and I wanted to be a part of that great project. I had at the time recently founded a nonprofit that even today sends high school and college students abroad to do community service work. Our mission seemed very consistent with this idea of help and health. In fact, our not-so-hidden agenda was to expose our bright, high-powered, achievement-oriented, mostly upper-middle-class students to a very different way of life, the way people lived in remote villages in Kenya, Nepal, or Peru, where we sent our students. What we love to say is that people in those villages were more into being rather than becoming, and it was true. And our students benefited from the cultural wisdom of village life throughout the world. Unfortunately, times changed. Those villages started to show signs of Americanization. I remember vividly the time I took a group over the poorest excuse for a road in northern Thailand, and after a 3-hour drive, we went to settle down into life in a Hmong village, only to find Madonna playing on the boombox when we got there. At the same time these villages started to succumb to the cultural hegemony of Madonna, their parents were increasingly afraid to send them off. We were no longer really doing what we had set out to do so many years ago, and we started to joke that we should create virtual trips where people could go on a program without ever leaving their bedroom. Probably if we'd done that, I'd be very wealthy now, but that wasn't to be, and instead I left the organization I had founded and had run for over 20 years. I was really frustrated and concerned with where the world was and where it seemed to be headed. Lots of distraction, less authentic communication. So I decided to look backwards, and that's when I decided on the rabbinic track. What I found in Judaism amazed me. Turns out Judaism has been considering the question of how we relate to technology for over 2,500 years. And how's that possible? Because Judaism is in no small way based on our relationship to the planet as mediated through agriculture. And agriculture was one of the first widespread uses of technology. And here's the crazy part. Agriculture is just a placeholder for any technology, so we can actually extrapolate from what the Torah has to say to today. So what does the Torah teach us? And I'm doing this in no small way because it's Shavuot, and we're celebrating Torah and teaching and the receiving of Torah right now. So what can the Torah teach us about our relationship to technology? Here's what it says. That our proper stance vis-a-vis any type of environment, not just the environment writ large, but any environment in which we find ourselves, is one of congruence, where we understand we are a part of its ecosystem and do not have dominion over it. That when we do try to be its master, we almost invariably screw things up. That trying to solve a problem created by technology with a technological solution is a fool's errand. That highly technological societies are characterized by autocratic rule, gross disparities in wealth and income, and an immiserated underclass. And if that sounds very familiar with us today, it should. What else do we learn? That every 7 years, we should take a deep and major rest to allow for regeneration, creation, and a letting go of the belief that we can control every outcome. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, the Torah teaches us that we need to change our relationship to time. Technology was supposed to give us more time for leisure or creative pursuits by allowing us to do things more efficiently, that is, in less time. It hasn't worked out that way. We work more now than ever because, among other things, smartphones and the like have homogenized time. One day is just like another. Every hour can be just the same. Judaism proposed 1 day of rest in every 7, where we did fundamentally different things from the remainder of the week, and in so doing, we would have a different experience of time. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating that all of us do a full stop for 24 hours straight. It probably would be a great thing, but most of us aren't likely to do that. Short of that, however, Judaism does suggest that we set an intention, in this case perhaps changing our relationship to time, and then establish a structure to support the achievement of that intention, and then following the structure religiously. Now to the dad part. My son, Jonah, just turned in his cap and gown. Over the last few days, he's been reflecting on his time at Harvard, and I was heartened to hear him say that the biggest problem he had with Harvard was that nobody ever seemed comfortable just chilling. Mark Zuckerberg, this past Thursday, proclaimed a call to action, that everyone should find a purpose and that we should all just get into motion. That's not the problem at Harvard, so says my son. It's that by contrast, people never stop to listen, to reflect, to rest, to just stop. Everyone has to be doing something all the time. In another era, I might have summarized the situation up by saying that people at Harvard are into becoming, not being. So, I hope my son and all of us for that matter, find the time just to stop. And to close, I'll put on my rabbi hat, aka my yarmulke for that occasion. And like Mark Zuckerberg did on Thursday, I'll close with a Jewish blessing. Interestingly, he closed with the Misha Berach, and honestly, I think he misconstrued its intentions. He was talking about wanting people to have the courage to get into motion, take a risk, etc., etc. And so he talked about how he actually recites or sings, I'm not sure, the Debbie Friedman version of the Misha Berach, the song, to his daughter frequently in the evening, so that she will have the courage to make her life a blessing. Anyway, I want to end with a different blessing, and not coincidentally, it's a blessing that is in this week's Parsha, with the theme of just finding time to slow down, reflect, and stop. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. May God's countenance shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God's countenance be lifted up unto you, and may God grant you the most precious gift of all, the gift of peace. And I hope all of us find peace. And even as I've been giving this talk, I saw through alerts that Donald Trump has indeed decided to take the United States out of the Paris Accords. So I hope we all can find peace, and maybe look back to Judaism and other great fonts of wisdom to let us know how we need to relate to our environment, so that we can support, nurture, and sustain it, so it will support, nurture, and sustain us, and we won't either with consciousness or without consciousness destroy the very habitat that supports us. So maybe that's a call to action. So this has been Rabbi Kenneth Hahn with Ask the Rabbi Thursdays. If you found this interesting and useful, please share it. Like the Sim Shalom Facebook page, and please tune in again next Monday for Music Mondays. With that, I'll say I wish you a very peaceful, restful, rejuvenating, and perhaps perspective-granting and changing Shabbat. Lehitraot.